Hello, writers. Today, let's talk about photos. Now, I know you've been spending the whole quarter working on words and writing, but photos are a really critical part of a story. It's one of the main gateways that really opens up to bring readers into your story. And typically, as I've said, we have Planet photographers who provide the photos for your stories, but this quarter, because of the pandemic, that's not as available. You will be collaborating this week with photographers who will be working to get either a photo or a photo illustration to go with your story, but we need more than one. And so that's where you come in. One of your primary jobs this week is going to be to track down photos for your story. So how do you know what photos you want and where to get them? And how do you make sure that you get more photos like this and less like this? Okay, so let's talk about what photos you need for your story. They really need to be things that tell key parts of your story. Each photo you should think of as a storytelling tool in the way that paragraphs are a storytelling tool in your story, scenes, for example. So when you think about the photos, think about photos that show important people in the story, important places in the story, important actions in the story, and important objects in the story. Now, in an ideal world, you will find a photo that has all of those different elements in one photo. Here's a photo that I took while I was reporting on a story in Bristol Bay. The story was about Daniel Schindler, who's this legendary University of Washington scientist who studies the salmon runs in Bristol Bay, Alaska. And these salmon runs are connected to a proposed huge gold and copper mine that would be built in the headwaters of some of these runs. And so as you can see here, I have a photo that really has all the elements in one photo. It has people, it has Daniel Schindler, it has him in Alaska, it has him studying salmon, and you have the salmon, right? So awesome. Fortunately, I was able to get that photo published with this story, but not all photos are like that, and you don't need all photos to be like that. And here are examples of some of the other photos that that were published with that story, just to give you some examples. So here's a landscape photo that shows the place with the salmon in it. And here's a photo of David Schindler, who's Daniel Schindler's dad. And here's another photo of this tiny little object called an otolith that's found inside the head of salmon and is used by scientists to track their movements. And here's a photo of the place where the mine is proposed to be built. So you have a landscape photo. So again, there's examples of different kinds of photos here, right? You have landscape, you have the objects, you have a person, you have the locations. So you have all these different elements in separate individual photos. And these photos came from a variety of places. Some of them are places where you can get a photo. Some of these photos came from a university. And some of them came from somebody who took photos for a university and was willing to share those photos with us. And then the landscape mining photo was something from National Geographic that we bought. Needless to say, you're not going to be buying photos. We're going to be looking for photos that are available for free. Now that you've seen an example of what kinds of photos might go into a story, it's time for you to think about what photos you want for your story. For starters, I recommend making a list of the kinds of things that you might want a photo of. So that would be a list of the people who would be good for photos, places, actions, and objects. See if you can sit down and make that list. And then as you start to look for photos, you want to look for photos that have a couple of characteristics. First of all, you want to look for photos that have good basic quality. That means photos that are in focus, where the exposure is good, so they're not too light or too dark. You want photos that have a main subject. Sometimes photos wind up being very cluttered. You remember that photo from the start of this show? So you don't want a cluttered photo where people can't quite tell what the photo is really about. You want to have a very clear central subject. And then you want photos that have a basic high resolution quality that will reproduce well on our website. So there's two basic kinds of file formats for photos. A RAW, R-A-W, file format is the highest quality. Those are great if you can get them. If you can't, a JPEG can work if it's a high resolution JPEG. You do not want to just copy a photo off of a website. Unfortunately, that's a poor enough quality that it wouldn't really reproduce well on our website. So you need to get a more original photo than that. Now that we've talked about what kinds of photos you want, let's discuss a little bit about where you might go get them. So there are a couple of places that you can look to get free photos. Remember, the planet is not in a position to pay for photos. So we need to seek out sources of good quality photos that are free for us to use. So there's a couple of places that are good places to hunt for that. One is government agencies. Government agencies have, their photos are public records. And so we can go to them and ask for copies of photos. Another place is public universities. Again, public agencies. And so those photos are ones that should be available for free. And then once you get past that, you have to start asking people for permission to use photos that they might otherwise charge for. So that would be individuals, nonprofit agencies, or private companies. Those are a couple of different examples. And even with the government agencies or the public universities, you're going to have to contact them to get high quality images. And you're going to need to ask them for the photos, but they should be willing to give them to you for free since they're public records. So how do you go about even figuring out who has these photos that you might want? There's three ways that I've used that I find pretty productive. One is to use Google, like we do for everything else. You use the Google Images function. So you search under Google, standard Google search, and then you click on the Images search. And if you see any images that look promising using the search terms that you're using, look for ones that are a .gov or .edu website, because those are more likely to be public images or images that an organization is willing to share. And once you identify images that look promising like that, then you contact the agency or university that controls that website, the department that controls it, and let them know, hey, I'm a Planet reporter for a magazine at Western Washington University. We are looking for photos to go with this story that I'm doing. I'm interested in this particular photo. Can you help me find out where I can get a good quality one of it and permission to use it? Another way, so that's Google Images. That's one way to do it. Another way is to check websites. Particularly of sources that you have in your story. So these could be websites that are maintained by a private company or a nonprofit or somebody else that you're reporting on, but check their websites. And if you see any photos where you think, wow, that would be a great photo, then you can contact those sources and ask if those are photos that you can use. And then finally, just asking your sources. Contact the people that you've interviewed and say, listen, we really need photos for our story. Do you have any good ones that you can recommend? And you can be specific. So if it's an individual person that's a character in your story, you could ask them if they have any good photos of themselves. It might be a portrait, so professionally done, or it might be a photo of them out in the field doing some kind of action. But ask them if they can send you copies of those and they'd be willing to share them. And then finally, with any photo you get, you need to be sure to get the credit and source information. So that means when we publish the photo, who do we credit for taking the photo, and who do we say is the source of the photo? Sometimes that's the same, but sometimes it's a little different. You give credit for a person who took the photo, but the source might be an agency that the person worked for. And then you want to get very clear permission to use the photo, and a useful way to do that is to just ask them to send you an email along with the image that grants the planet permission to reproduce the image. So that should answer your basics. If you have any questions, please contact me or ask your story editor. And between us and the photo editor, we should be able to answer any of your questions. This is really important for your story to have strong photos. I can't stress the importance of it enough. So please spend this week out there tracking down photos. Happy hunting.